You know, one of the great things about sports is that if you watch enough of a sport, you're bound to see something you've never seen before. That makes sense, right? First off though, before we get too deep into the video, I just wanted to real quick say that I hope everyone out there is doing alright, staying safe, or at the very least warm if you're one of the many without power tonight, or didn't have it last night, or might not have it for the next couple of nights. Fortunately, we are one of the few that do have power right now, but we're still without internet, which there's worse things. It just means I don't really know exactly how I'm going to get this video uploaded on time at the moment. I might be able to figure out, or maybe you can bear with me if it's out a little bit later than usual. Still, there's trees on houses, power lines down just in our neighborhood, so I know there's a lot going out there, and especially with that being the case, there may be a lot of people that weren't able to watch this game just yet, and maybe you're hoping to watch it later. You know, it was a fun game to watch, and I just wanted to give one last chance to avoid any spoilers. Pause the video now and come back to it after you've watched the game if that was the case. And so, with all that having been said, what's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where it feels good to be on the other end of one of these, as the Kraken shut out the Nashville Predators 3-0. I mean, why does a 3-0 shutout with Decord in net on TNT sound familiar? It wasn't quite as fun as that game, but it was a pretty fun Kraken win, and it makes them 5-1 on this homestand and gets them back above NHL 500 at 10-9-1, which they were a couple games ago, but then lost to the Rangers, so back again over NHL 500. It was a great game for the Kraken, so I can deal with all of the little extra hurdles that are going into this particular R&R. It was, yeah, again, after especially the 4 shutouts that the Kraken have already faced this season, being on the bad end of, it's good to finally be on the good end of it. Now, there was one moment where it looked like the shutout might get broken up, but it turned out to be a good night pretty much from start to finish for the Kraken. Maybe with a few hiccups here and there, definitely some chances that they kind of gave the Predators to, at the very least, keep the fans on their toes to make sure that the shutout didn't feel like a foregone conclusion throughout the game, though with how Decord was playing, it kind of seemed like it might be. Of course, when it comes to foregone conclusions, whether or not it was going to be a shutout or not aside, it felt like pretty much from the first shift of this game that the foregone conclusion was the Kraken were going to win it. Either that, or they were going to embarrass themselves in a pretty big way. And jumping into the game, the one other notable thing before we actually get into things was that Shane Wright was once again a healthy scratch in this game, or at least we assume he's a healthy scratch. We haven't heard anything otherwise. And now that it's 2 games in a row, that it might be worth looking into a little bit more if he's a healthy scratch again. I don't feel like we really have the time for this one. Plus, it was a fun enough game that yeah, we'll focus on the positives for now. And the first positive for the Kraken came less than a minute into the game. Actually, maybe the first one was that they did have a pretty good first shift, but less than a minute in, they're going to get their first power play of the game because Nashville put the wrong starting lineup out on the ice from what they had written down. Of course, this is something where before every game, the home and away teams announce their starting lineups, the first 5 guys that are going to be out on the ice, which is especially important for the away team because the home team gets a chance to see that lineup and respond to it with their lineup. So when Nashville puts the wrong 5 guys out on the ice, well, that's not necessarily playing by the rules, which right away I have to say is something that I personally had never seen before, at least live anyway. After it happened, I remember that was a rule in the rulebook since I have read the NHL rules a couple of times to put some of the 101 videos together. But yeah, I never really expected to see it live in game. Apparently the last time that it happened in the NHL was late in the 21-22 season in Edmonton against the St. Louis Blues. Weirdly enough, Bialsma has seen it somewhat recently. It happened in the AHL playoffs, if I'm not mistaken, against the Hershey Bears when the Firebirds played them. So I guess he'd seen it somewhere recently. The Kraken coaching staff was ready for it. Apparently when they got the lineup from the Predators, they noticed something weird that Forsberg was not in their starting lineup. Instead, they had 91 marked on that starting line, which is not a lineup that they've ever run for any significant time in a game so far this season, and wasn't the lines when they did their rushes in warmups before the game got started. So then when they see that lineup card, they knew to be at least looking when the players go out there and stand on the ice for the national anthem. They have the starting players from each team stand on the blue lines for the national anthem. They can look at the numbers on the backs of the Nashville players and realize, those aren't the guys that they wrote on the paper. let's save that in the back of our minds for when the play gets stopped the first time. So that's what they do. They tell the officials, and after a little while of general confusion for most people, I would say, in the arena, what the officials could possibly be talking about that quickly into the game, immediately followed by the announcement of the penalty, and then pretty much an entire arena laughing at the misfortunes of the Predators, and what I suppose you could describe as the power going out in the brains of the coaching staff of the Predators when they put together that lineup and then put the guys out on the ice. I mean, look, I understand that mistakes happen, even ones that are as rare and hard to make as this one is. In the end, it's a whoopsie daisy that cost them 2 minutes of power play at the start of the game, and if they're able to survive it, then no harm done. But honestly, it kind of felt like as soon as this happens, the Kraken have to win this game. There's no way they can't win a game after the opposing team put out the wrong lineup and gave you a power play right away. I mean, it would be one thing if it was one of the best teams in the NHL, a team playing like the Jets or the Panthers, and they make this mistake. Yeah, they're probably going to be able to come back from it, and you're just glad that you got that one little extra chance at the start of the game. But when it's a team that's having things go as poorly in just about every way possible other than the goaltending as the Predators have to this point in the season, and then this happens, yeah, you gotta win that game, otherwise it's gonna be real embarrassing, especially in your own building, which, yeah, it's kind of the only way this happens. Oh yeah, and on national TV, no less. Anyway, the Kraken go to the power play, and I gotta say, I feel like they deserve to score on this first power play, not because of how they got it, that part is irrelevant at this point, but because of how they play on this power play. It is one of the better power plays they've had so far this season, certainly one of the better ones they haven't scored on, and ultimately the only reason they don't score on this one with a couple of good chances, forcing Saros to move side to side, well, it's just Saros was absolutely fantastic all game long, and he keeps the Kraken off the board by himself almost on this power play, or I guess kill for the Predators. So the first Kraken power play comes to an end without them able to get one past Saros and fully capitalize on the hilarious miscue from the Nashville bench, which also I had a thought there with especially how ridiculous of a penalty this is for Nashville to have taken, and this is the last time that I'll belabor the point, but I thought it would be kind of funny and maybe more fitting that if with this penalty specifically, or maybe you would want to expand it to all bench minors, I think especially with this one, it would be fitting that instead of sending one of your players, like a random fourth line guy or whatever, to the box to serve the penalty, instead you have to send one of the coaches or maybe the head coach scuffling across the ice in his dress shoes to get to the penalty box, and then he has to sit there, or she, for those 2 minutes, and then scuffle back across the ice at the next whistle or something like that. I don't know. It's ridiculous, it would never happen, but it would be a lot more entertaining, and I think in this particular case, a little bit more fitting for how the penalty comes off in the first place. Back at 5-on-5 though, even in spite of the good start the Kraken were able to get off to, aided by that power play, the rest of the first period, or at least the vast majority of this first period, is kind of clumsy, I feel like is the best word for it, really at both ends of the ice. Neither team was able to really get much of a flow or get into much of a rhythm. Neither team transitioning all that cleanly or getting set up in the offensive end and able to move the puck with any kind of, I don't know, it just didn't really feel like either team was firing on all cylinders or really making things happen the way they wanted to, and not necessarily even to do with how the other team was playing against them. It was just kind of a lot of self-inflicted minor wounds, if you will. And eventually, towards the end of the period, the Kraken get their second power play of the game. I think the Predators had one in this first period as well that really didn't go much of anywhere. The Kraken penalty kill was fantastic all night long. They weren't quite as busy as the Nashville penalty kill, but they still did do their job pretty well. And that was followed up with another very strong-looking Kraken power play here at the end of the second period. But once again, the Kraken are just unable to score. Chandler Stevenson gets absolutely robbed by a great sprawling toe save from Saros. Once again, he's doing a lot of the work himself on the kill for the Predators. So the Kraken, even after everything that went well for them, really just on those two power plays that bookend the period, but everything that went well for them on those two power plays, they still are unable to beat Saros, and we go to the first intermission with the score still knotted at 0. Eventually, though, as we get into the start of the second period and through the first few minutes, one of the two teams is finally able to get some kind of momentum, or at least a consistent number of chances at the other end of the ice. Unfortunately, it's the Predators that are kind of getting the better of the Kraken here, and I would say we're somewhat all over the Kraken for the first 5, 6, maybe 7 minutes of the second period. The Kraken are getting their chances here and there the other way, but they're just not as many, farther fewer between, and not that dangerous. Meanwhile, the Kraken are kind of flirting with disaster at the other end. Decord had to make a couple of pretty nice saves, and defensively there was a whole lot of bend but don't break going on. Just kind of turning things over, not quite able to get the puck across the blue line to get a change. A couple of times getting hemmed in while Nashville gets guys on and off the ice. This wasn't the cleanest hockey from the Kraken, and the flow was broken up a couple of times by another Nashville power play, a couple Kraken power plays, none of which end up going anywhere. The special teams in general don't score on the night. Eventually, though, the Kraken are able to get things turned back around, and it's the fourth line that's able to do it, which isn't the fourth line we've been talking about with Gord, Tanev, and Cartier. This time it was Ben Myers, Cartier, and Tanev that were out there that get the Kraken into the offensive end, set up after their second, or I guess fourth of the game, failed power play, second of the period. They get the Kraken set up at 5-on-5, keep the puck in that end with some good forward checking and a couple pretty nice keeps at the blue line, especially helped out by Brandon Montour, who was not letting that puck across the line if he could at all help it. So that great shift from the fourth line allows the second line for the Kraken, the Stevenson line in this particular case. That meant Sprong and Schwartz on either side of Stevenson to get out there against some tired legs for the Predators in their end. And although it takes them a couple of tries and one more fantastic keep at the blue line by Montour to make sure the puck doesn't cross that blue line so Nashville can get a reset, well, on that keep, a backhanded stab at the puck to keep it from crossing the blue line, Montour just throws it down towards the net where Chandler Stevenson has gotten himself once again all alone one-on-one with Saros, though this time, unlike with the power play at the end of the first period, he's decided that he's a little bit too snake-bitten. He's not going to try and beat a goaltender as hot as Saros one-on-one by himself. So instead what he's going to do is get Saros to move to the forehand side and then throw a pass back to the other side where Daniel Sprong has come back into the play, originally looking for a rebound, but he realizes that Stevenson has juked out Saros. By the time Sprong gets the puck, it's a wide open net for him to put it into. He makes no mistake, buries it to give the Kraken the 1-0 lead and give Sprong his first goal back with the team. But as great as it was to see Sprong score again for the Kraken, I gotta say it's the two passes that set this play up that make it one of those plays that I don't feel like my description or the screenshots really can do it justice. It's just one that I would have to recommend going back and watching the highlight of it. It's a fantastic play, one for that keep at the blue line by Montour, then a very good backhand pass while his back is to the offensive end to get it up to the net to Stevenson, and then a fantastic set of moves for Stevenson to fake out Saros, who was standing on his head, to set up Sprong for that easy goal. And one more thing here real quick, by the way, I hope it's not too noticeable. I don't know if it will be, but hopefully the screenshots aren't too much worse than they usually are. I did have to take these on a laptop and then use a trackpad to draw the arrows, so they might be a little bit sloppier than you're used to. That being said, if they're not that much sloppier, I don't know what that says about how I usually am able to draw lines with a mouse. Regardless of all that, though, the Kraken have the 1-0 lead, and with Decord playing as well as he is at the other end of the ice, it feels like that might just be enough. And for the second period, it certainly was as we get to the second intermission, with the Kraken still leading 1-0. And who knows if it was that shift for that line, that goal that they score, or maybe it was just the way that the matchups worked out. But maybe that's what earns them the first shift in the third period, where I hope you weren't late getting back to your TV or back to your seat if you were in the arena, as the Kraken got back to the third period on time, less than a minute into it, less than 30 seconds into it on that first shift. The Kraken win the faceoff back into their end. It takes them a little bit to get going the other way again, but Schwartz gets it up to Montour. Montour carries it through the neutral zone, and then on a 2-on-3 rush, which this is 2-on-3, they are outnumbered, but Montour is able to get it across to Stevenson as they cross the blue line. And then for whatever reason, all three Predators players just kind of glom towards Stevenson. And I say that in some ways it's almost worse than that. Two of them, the two defenders, go towards Stevenson. And then Forsberg, who's a very good player in his own right, just kind of gets lost in no man's land in the middle of the offensive end. All of which is to say, I don't know what was going on here other than some really bad defense by the Predators. and it allows Stevenson then to fire a puck across the offensive end to the far side of the net, where Brandon Montour has just skated through open ice, diving at that back door, and all he has to do is put his stick on the puck with, as he said after the game, a strong bottom hand. He's able to do that and tips it into the back of the net with absolutely nothing that Saros can do about it. Just like that, it's 2-0 Kraken. So I suppose the good news is that even if you were late getting back to watch the third period, it seems like the Predators were late getting back mentally into the third period as well. The Kraken, with that early 2-0 lead, are able to hold it throughout the rest of the period. It was one where it felt a little bit more back and forth than it really turns out to be. I mean, the Kraken did definitely have the majority of the time with the puck and spent more time in the offensive end, so maybe saying it was back and forth is a little unfair to the Kraken. In the end, though, the shots on goal certainly don't lie. The Kraken nearly double the shots on goal of the Predators, and some of that was that whenever the Predators did get chances, and like I said, especially in the first period, the Kraken were giving them some chances and making Decord work for his shutout. The Predators were also missing the net a lot, and to the Kraken credit defensively, part of that bend but don't break is they would turn the puck over, fail to get across the blue line, but then someone would step up with a huge block to prevent the shot from getting to Decord and forcing him to make yet another fantastic save. Though this was definitely one of those games for Decord in net that when he did have to make the fantastic saves, and he made a few of them, he just made them look a lot more casual than they had any right looking. I mean, there's one in particular here in the third period that I want to say was on the last power play for the Predators, where Decord makes a save on Marchessault that it's an absolute, to me, it's a highlight reel save. I mean, it's not going to be a save of the year type of save, especially because of how easy Decord makes it look, but Marchessault is able to get around all of the Kraken players one-on-one with Decord and then makes him go from one side of the crease to the other right at the top of the crease, and he's able to lift the puck over Decord's pad with a quick 1-2 touch of the puck, and Decord just kind of snares it out of the air as he lunges across his crease like it's nothing. I mean, honestly, it's one of those saves that happen every now and then, especially when a goaltender is really on their game, like, well, really both goaltenders in this game were, but especially Decord, that has every right to be a highlight reel save, but probably won't be just because of how easy Decord in this case made it look. Eventually, though, Nashville is able to find the back of the Kraken net to get one past Decord. As Novak kicks a puck in, it's called a good goal on the ice. They do immediately go to review, though, without even having to have the Kraken challenge it, so they knew that it was a borderline one as they made the call of a good goal on the ice. Go to review, and fortunately, they come back from review having been able to make the right call on the second opportunity. They take the goal off the board for a kicking motion. Just like that, the shutout is preserved. The Kraken are able to survive the empty net opportunity towards the end of the game. It's around 3.5, 4 minutes when Saros leaves the net, and it doesn't take really all that long for the Kraken to find it. It's Yanni Gourde, of all people, actually, who finds it, so he gets a little bit of redemption for the hilariously missed empty net in the previous game, or I guess 2 games ago against the Islanders. Gourde had that one that he put off the crossbar, which, to be perfectly honest, that was a much easier empty net goal that he missed against the Islanders than this one he scores against the Predators. This one, he actually had to out-hustle somebody to a puck along the boards and then kind of fling it backhand towards the net from an angle. Meanwhile, that one was fairly straight on and with no one between him or really challenging him for it. Either way, he gets his redemption. The Kraken win this one 3-0 with the empty net goal. And just a fun night all around, which I think for a lot of people that might be dealing without power or who knows what else after the storm, yeah, it was a welcome sight and finishes off a strong homestand, a desperately needed strong homestand for the Kraken. They go 5-1, only losing that game to the Rangers, which certainly helps make up for the road trip that we'd all like to forget about. This homestand certainly helps do that. And the last thing I want to say about this game before we move on to the Kraken 3 stars is that for Predators fans, I know this is, well, I don't know how many of you are watching to this point. If you are, kudos, I suppose, and thank you very much for sticking through that horrendous game for your team, and then a Kraken fan reliving a horrendous game for your team, especially after the mistake at the beginning of it. But I gotta say, I do not understand how this Predators team is as bad as they are. There was a lot of moments in this game where they looked worse than some of the teams that actually should be bad. I mean, we haven't seen, or the Kraken haven't seen the Sharks or the Ducks yet, but they played against the Blackhawks, who is not a very good team, and the Blackhawks looked significantly better than at least this one game of the Predators. And especially considering that Saros has had a fantastic season so far, especially lately. I mean, he's had a fantastic last stretch of games that have brought his stats right up there with Decord's. And he's still, after this game, I think it was 5-9-3, which, is even better representation of why win-loss record is a stupid one to attribute to a goalie. But Saros is playing fantastic, and then you put the talent that is in that lineup in front of Saros. It just makes absolutely no sense to me how this team is as bad as they are so far this season. I still feel like they're going to find a way to get it turned around. Whether or not it's in time to salvage the season and make the playoffs, who knows? But at least for now, I have to say that I'm glad the Kraken faced the Predators at least 2 of the times early on in the season while they're still struggling before they inevitably, I think, get this thing turned around. With that, though, let's finish things out with those Kraken 3 stars, as always brought to you by the patrons over on Patreon. If you want to help decide these Kraken 3 stars after every Kraken game, you can help support a little bit more than you already are by watching this point by going to the link down below in the description and supporting on Patreon as well. And with the first star, well, with the 3 stars, I'm really not going to argue too much with the official 3 stars. If you've seen those, I am going to change up the order of them a little bit. The first star I'll keep the same, though. It's Chandler Stevenson for me. He ends up getting an assist on all 3 goals. He gets late attributed a secondary assist on the empty netter for Gord. But even if that had never happened, he, I would say, just played his best game as a Kraken so far. I don't necessarily think he's been bad. He's just kind of been not super noticeable, which with the contract he just gets signed to is a little bit tough. But even outside of the snake bit nature of his goal scoring so far, and to be fair, he's not necessarily a goal scorer. He's much more of a playmaker. In a lot of ways, similar to what we remember from Wenberg, a guy that definitely looks pass first and then will shoot, but he still can make some good moves. We saw him make a couple of very good moves right in front of the net. One of them required an even better save from Saros on that power play early on in the game in the end of the first period. And then the second great move, well, he learned his lesson from the first time and passed it out to a teammate to put into the empty net. That got his night off to a great start. Just a fantastic night, really, at both ends of the ice. He had a couple of good defensive plays as well, a couple turnovers that he created to get things going back the other way. Just a great night for that line in general, and he was the lead of it. Then the second star, I am going to go with Joey Decord. Obviously, the first shutout of the season for the Kraken, and a few saves that, even if they don't necessarily look like the type of saves you'd see on an ESPN top 10 or whatever, they're saves that really, the fact that they don't look like highlight reel saves is a highlight in itself. Just how well Decord was playing in this game, how casual he made a lot of those saves look. Yeah, it's hard to overlook how good Decord was in this game, even with the Kraken taking care of business at the other end as well. And then the third star, again, can't argue with the official here, going with Brandon Montour, switching Decord and Montour. Officially, Decord was third, Montour second, Stevenson first, but I'll switch Montour and Decord. So Montour, third star here for the R&R. Just another fantastic game from Montour. I suppose in some ways getting back to more of the Montour we remember from the start of the season, where through the first 3 weeks of the season, he was, I would say, the undisputed MVP of the team early on. And he's still been good since then, just like I've said before, not necessarily the game breaker that he was through large parts of the first 3 weeks of the season. This game looked a lot more like the Montour we saw early on in the season, just absolutely taking the game over at points. Obviously the goal, but I think his secondary assist, as weird as it is to say, I think the secondary assist for him on that first goal is the most impressive thing he did in this game. And he also had a back check to prevent a breakaway opportunity in, I want to say, the first period. I think it was the first period. He makes a back check. It could have been the third. Either way, it actually was the third. Anyway, doesn't matter. I can't go back and check the replay because of no internet, but either the first or the third period, he makes a back check to stop a breakaway chance, which was, he just kind of comes out of nowhere. It's maybe not to the same degree, but for any Seahawks fans that remember the Metcalf running the guy down after that Russell Wilson interception a few years ago, it's kind of like that. I mean, it was just one of those plays where you could see it developing in a bad way for the Kraken. It's going to be a free breakaway, one-on-one with all the time in the world. Hopefully Decord can, and maybe he still would have been able to the way he was playing tonight, but hopefully Decord can come up with a huge save. And then out of nowhere, here's Brandon Montour suddenly right in his back pocket, making sure he can't get a clean shot off and allowing Decord to kind of give a little poke check to help kill it off entirely. So, yeah, fantastic night all around for Montour again at both ends of the ice. I think You could obviously throw Daniel Sprong in there. Jaden Schwartz gets 2 assists on the game as well. So, especially that second line, a fantastic night. The one other thing I just now remembered, otherwise I would have mentioned it in the third period, but there was one instance of some ref you suck chance after Beniers got cross-checked in the face and was cut his lip. He was bleeding out of his mouth, and very upset at the official for not calling anything. It should have been a double minor for the Kraken, but I suppose it was one of those where the Kraken had already gotten 4 power plays to like 2 for Nashville or something like that. So the officials just decided it's going well enough for you. You don't need another power play or 2. That we can finally close things out here on this game and this homestand as a whole. Actually, one more thing real quick. There was an idea on Patreon that I liked, and I think we can try and play with as the season goes along. Figure out exactly how we want to make it work, but the idea was to try and do 3 stars at the end of extended homestand or extended road trip of 3 stars of that whole homestand or road trip. And while I didn't remember it until I was back out of having access to the internet, so I wasn't able to get it up on Patreon, I'll try and get that up by the next time the Kraken have a extended of it. I would say at least 4 games homestand or road trip is probably a good cutoff. But for this one, I'm going to go, even in spite of how this game went, I think we got to go Tanev 1. He was dominant for the Kraken through those first 4 games. I'll go Decord 2. Decord gets wins on all 5 of the Kraken wins. I mean, unfortunately for Grubauer, he gets the 1 start where the Kraken just don't score goals. He only allows 2 the other way against one of the best teams in the NHL, and still somehow ends up with the lone loss. But Decord gets 5 wins, fantastic in all 5 of those games. So we'll go Tanev 1. I'm having a tough one with the third one. Let me know down in the comments what you think. I'm leaning towards Yanni Gourde, especially just because that line was the driving force there through those first few games. The Gourde, Tanev, Cartier line. I suppose Cartier you could throw in there too, though I feel like Gourde maybe had a little bit more in it than Cartier did. The first line also was fantastic. Obviously, Jared McCann, through any stretch of Kraken games, you could probably throw in as a star. So for now, I'll stick with Tanev 1 star for the homestand, Decord 2nd star for the homestand, and yeah, we'll go with Gourde for the 3rd star. He gets his first 2 goals, even if he did miss the other empty netter of the season. So let me know what you think in the comments of that idea and those stars for this homestand. And until next time, stay safe out there. Be good to each other. God bless and go Kraken.